Have you ever opened a book that didn't just sit in your hands, but somehow looked back at you like it was waiting to be read by you and only you? Picture this: a quiet library late in the afternoon. Sunlight sneaks through tall windows, falling in golden stripes across rows of books. The air smells like old pages and promise. You trail your fingers along hundreds of spines until one suddenly makes you stop. It isn't shiny or new. In fact, its corners are slightly bent, its cover faded, but something about it feels alive. You pull it out, brush the dust away, and open the first page. The words seem to breathe. Then something magical. The letters shift, glow faintly, and whisper, "Read me." Your heart beats faster. You lean closer, and as you start to read, the room disappears. The chair beneath you, the noise outside, even the clock all fade. You are no longer in the library. You are inside the story. That's what real reading does. It doesn't just teach English, it invites you to live in it. Every word pulls you deeper, not because you're forcing yourself to learn, but because the language begins to speak back. Most people think learning English is about memorizing, repeating, drilling. But language isn't a formula, it's a feeling. It's curiosity, excitement, the spark that happens when you understand something without translation. In this story, you'll discover how one simple act, reading, can change not just how you speak English, but how you feel English. Because when the words start whispering to you, fluency doesn't come from study. It comes from connection. So, don't close the book yet. Something wonderful is about to happen on the next page. Have you ever read a story that made you forget about everything else, your phone, the noise, even time itself? That feeling is the secret doorway to learning English faster than you ever imagined. When you read a story in English, something magical happens inside your brain. You're not just reading words, you're thinking in English. You're imagining scenes, feeling emotions, hearing voices in your head that speak the language naturally. Every page turns your mind into a tiny world of rhythm, tone, and thought. Think about it like this. When you hear the sentence, "The little boy was thrilled to see the fireworks light up the sky," you don't stop to translate the word thrilled. You simply feel it. You imagine the boy's wide eyes, the sparkles exploding above him, the sound of laughter. And that's it, you've just learned a word through emotion, not explanation. That's what stories do. They teach you English without teaching. They trick your brain into learning the way a child does, by living it. Every sentence you read becomes an experience, not a lesson. When you read, you begin to build a quiet friendship with the language. The characters start to talk to you. The descriptions become memories, and suddenly English isn't something you're trying to learn, it's something you're starting to feel. You stop asking, "What does this mean?" and start saying, "I understand this." And that's a powerful transformation, because reading doesn't just improve your English, it changes your relationship with it. It makes English not just a subject, but a story you're part of. So the next time you open a book, don't rush. Let the story pull you in, let the words breathe, let them live. Because every story you read in English is actually helping you write the story of you. I still remember the first time I tried to read a book in English. I was excited at first. Holding it in my hands felt like holding a dream. But as soon as I opened it, that excitement disappeared. The words looked unfamiliar, the sentences too long, and I couldn't understand much. I told myself, maybe reading in English isn't for me. For weeks, the book sat on my shelf, untouched. I kept thinking, try again later, but later never came. Until one rainy evening changed everything. I was sitting by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass, when I noticed a small book lying on the table beside me. It wasn't thick or difficult, just a simple story about friendship. Something inside me whispered, try again. So I did. The first page felt slow. I paused often. I guessed meanings. But with each sentence, something began to shift. I didn't understand every word, but I could feel what the writer was trying to say. The rhythm of the sentences started to make sense, even when the vocabulary didn't. And then, by the third page, something magical happened. I stopped translating. I stopped worrying about what I didn't know. I just read. I could imagine the characters laughing, walking in the rain, sharing a quiet moment together. I wasn't reading English anymore, I was living it. The story became a movie in my mind, and the words became emotions I could almost touch. When I closed the book, I smiled. For the first time, I felt proud, not because I finished a story, but because I understood it. Not perfectly, but naturally. That moment changed how I saw English forever. I realized it's not about knowing every word, it's about letting the story carry you, trusting that meaning will follow feeling. And that was the day I fell in love with reading. The day English stopped being a subject and became a voice inside me. That moment changed how I saw English forever. I realized it's not about knowing every word, it's about letting the story carry you, trusting that meaning will follow feeling. And that was the day I fell in love with reading. The day English stopped being a subject and became a voice inside me. That's when I realized something powerful. Reading isn't one way. It's not just me looking at words. It's the language quietly talking back. Every time I read a sentence that touched me, it found a place to stay. It was as if English had become a voice inside me, calm, patient, and familiar. I began to think in small English phrases without forcing myself to translate. It was like hearing music that my mind had finally learned to sing along with. When I read a line like, "He was thrilled to see the sunrise," I didn't have to ask what thrilled meant. I felt it. I could almost see the warm light and imagine that same joy in my chest. The words weren't just information anymore. They were emotions. They were experiences. That's when I understood reading doesn't just teach you English. It teaches you how to feel English. Now, every story I read feels like a quiet conversation. The writer speaks, I listen, and together we build meaning. That's how English becomes natural, not through rules, but through rhythm and connection. And the more I read, the more I hear that gentle voice of the language guiding me forward. The more I read in English, the more I began to see something unexpected. One evening, I was halfway through a story about courage, about a young woman standing up for what she believed in, even when she was afraid. The story wasn't complicated, yet it reached into me in a way I didn't expect. As I turned the next page, I suddenly stopped. The words on the paper felt strangely familiar, almost as if they were describing me. Her fears sounded like my fears. Her hesitation felt like mine. The way she wanted to speak, but didn't know how, that was me every time I tried to express myself in English. And when she finally found the courage to speak her truth, I felt my own voice rising too, as if the story had reached inside my chest and pressed play. It was the first time I truly saw myself inside an English story. In that moment, reading stopped being about learning new words. It became personal. It became emotional. The story wasn't just teaching me a language, it was showing me how to feel through it. That's when I realized something powerful. Every story we read in English is also a story about ourselves. Each page holds a mirror, reflecting small pieces of who we are, who we used to be, or who we dream of becoming. I started noticing how every character I met taught me something new. The brave ones reminded me that mistakes are not failure. The lonely ones reminded me that I'm not alone. And the dreamers showed me that language is not only about speaking, it's about connecting hearts that may come from different worlds. Reading turned into a quiet kind of therapy. The more I read, the more I understood myself. Not only in English, but as a human being. I learned patience through slow sentences, curiosity through new settings, and confidence through the stories that echoed my own struggles. The books became my teachers, my friends, and sometimes my mirrors. That's the quiet magic of reading. It helps you see that learning English isn't just about words or grammar, it's about discovering yourself in another language. It's about realizing that emotions sound the same in every tongue, only dressed in different words. And when you reach that point, English no longer feels foreign. It feels like a second home, a place where your thoughts can finally find new ways to speak. Maybe that's what fluency truly means. Not perfection, not speed, but understanding, deep, emotional understanding between your heart and the words that once seemed distant. Every story you read pulls you closer to that feeling. So whenever I open a new book now, I don't ask, will I understand this? I ask, what will I understand about myself this time? There comes a time in every learner's journey when something quietly changes. In the beginning, reading in English feels slow and heavy. Every line demands focus. Every word feels like a puzzle. You move from sentence to sentence, pausing to think, translating in your mind, feeling unsure if you're even improving. I remember that stage clearly, the frustration, the constant urge to stop, the voice in my head whispering, "This is too hard." But one morning, everything shifted. I was sitting near a window with a cup of tea, reading a story I had started a few days earlier. The scene was simple: a man walking through an empty street at dawn, listening to the sound of his own footsteps. The writing was soft, slow, and calm. I kept reading line after line, without realizing how much time had passed. Then, suddenly, I looked up and it hit me. I had just read 4 pages straight, without stopping once, without translating, without struggling. For the first time, the language flowed effortlessly through me. I wasn't reading English anymore, I was simply reading. The words weren't foreign symbols. They were music, moving with rhythm and meaning. I felt like I was gliding, not climbing. That was my first true moment of flow. It's a strange and beautiful feeling when your brain stops fighting the language and starts dancing with it. You're no longer focused on understanding each detail. You're feeling the story as a whole. It's the point when English becomes invisible and all that's left is emotion. That's the moment when fluency starts to live inside you. After that day, I began to crave that feeling. I wanted to read more because I needed to practice, but because I wanted to stay in that flow, that quiet, immersive space where everything felt natural and alive. It became my favorite part of learning, losing myself inside a story so completely that I forgot I was even learning. What's fascinating is that this flow doesn't happen because of skill or luck. It happens because of trust. The moment you stop judging yourself and start trusting the story, your brain relaxes. It stops overthinking and starts absorbing. That's when English begins to feel like breathing smooth, steady, effortless. And the more you experience this, the stronger that feeling becomes. You start noticing it in everyday moments too, when you read signs, watch movies, or think in English without realizing it. That's when you know your journey is no longer about learning a language. It's about living in one. So the next time you pick up a book and feel lost in the first few pages, don't stop. Keep going. Flow doesn't arrive at the beginning, it waits for you at the middle, quietly, patiently, ready to surprise you the moment you let go. One night, as I was reading a story I loved, a thought crossed my mind: what if I said the words out loud? I hesitated at first. Speaking English still made me nervous. I worried about how I sounded, whether I was pronouncing everything correctly, whether I even had the right rhythm. But curiosity won, like it always does. I opened the book again, took a breath, and began to read softly to myself. At first, it felt strange. My voice was quiet, unsure, almost shy. But after a few lines, something changed. The words felt different. When I spoke them, they weren't just letters anymore, they were sounds, emotions, music. My tongue moved in ways it never had before. My breath found rhythm. My heart followed the story's pace. And suddenly, English didn't feel like something outside of me, it was inside me, flowing through my own voice. That night became a turning point. Reading out loud turned into my private ritual. Every evening, I stood in front of my mirror with a small book in hand. I would read each line slowly, giving the words, feeling, as if I were performing them for an invisible audience. If a sentence was sad, I softened my tone. If it was exciting, I let my voice rise. With every page, I could feel my confidence growing. Something magical happens when you give sound to the words you read. You start to hear your own progress. You catch your mistakes and fix them naturally. You become aware of rhythm, tone, and emotion, all without studying them directly. Reading out loud connects your mind, your breath, and your language into one smooth motion. It teaches you to feel how English wants to be spoken, not just how it's written. The more I practiced, the more powerful it felt. My voice began to carry the mood of the story. I wasn't just reading English, I was becoming English for a few minutes each night. It felt freeing, almost like acting. I could step into another world, another identity, and speak with the confidence that surprised even me. Over time, that habit began to shape the way I spoke in real life too. Conversations felt smoother. Words came easier. My sentences had rhythm, and my voice carried a new kind of strength. That's when I understood reading aloud isn't just practice, it's transformation. So if you ever feel shy speaking English, start here. Read your favorite story out loud. Let your voice tremble at first. Let it break, stumble, and rise again. Because with every sound, you're not just reading, you're becoming fluent in confidence. There was a time when I believed I needed hours every day to get better at English. I thought fluency belonged only to people who studied endlessly, the ones with notebooks, highlighters, and perfect discipline. But the truth is, my biggest progress didn't come from long study sessions. It came from 5 quiet minutes a day. It started almost by accident. Every morning, before the rush of the day began, I'd sit by my window with a cup of tea and read a single page from a storybook. Just one page. No rules, no dictionary, no targets. I told myself, 5 minutes, that's all. And then I would do the same thing at night before sleeping, reading one more page, even if I felt tired. It was such a small thing that it didn't feel like work. But day by day, something began to shift. My brain started to expect English every morning. The moment I opened my book, it felt like stepping into a familiar place, a space just for me and my thoughts. I began to notice patterns, phrases, and rhythms that used to feel impossible. The language no longer sounded foreign. It sounded like a melody I was finally learning to hum. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. But I never forced it. It grew naturally, like watering a small plant every day and watching it bloom on its own. The progress was quiet but powerful. My confidence grew, not because I was studying harder, but because I was consistent. That's the real secret, not how much time you spend, but how often you show up. Reading in English is like building a bridge between your heart and the language. Every short session adds another brick. You don't notice it at first, but one day you look back and realize you've built something solid, something unshakable. Even now, when life gets busy, I remind myself of that simple truth. You don't need hours. You just need presence. You need those 5 minutes when it's just you, the page, and the quiet hum of the story pulling you in. That's when English grows roots inside you. So if you've ever told yourself, I don't have time, remember this: 5 minutes is enough. Read while you wait for the bus. Read while your coffee cools. Read before you fall asleep. It doesn't matter where or when, what matters is that you keep showing up. Because fluency doesn't come from pressure, it comes from small moments of peace repeated again and again. 5 minutes a day can transform your English and maybe, just maybe, the way you see yourself. There's a moment in every learner's journey that feels almost magical the first time you understand something in English without translating it. You don't notice it at first. You're reading, lost in the story, moving from line to line, and suddenly you realize you didn't stop to think. You didn't search for meaning. You just knew. I still remember my first moment like that. I was reading a short story about a boy watching the ocean for the first time. The words were simple, but the feeling was powerful. The line said, he felt small, but free. I didn't stop to translate free in my language. I just felt it. It was like a light had turned on inside me, a warm, quiet recognition that I could feel English directly, not through a filter of definitions. That's the true reward of reading, not finishing a chapter or learning new vocabulary, but feeling the story speak to you in its own language. You begin to understand tone, humor, emotion, all without anyone explaining it. English stops being something you study and becomes something you live. Every page you read brings you closer to that moment. The connection grows stronger, until one day, you read a full paragraph and realize you haven't translated a single thing. You've crossed an invisible bridge. You're thinking in English. It doesn't mean you know every word, it means you understand the heart of what's being said. And that's far more powerful. It's a beautiful shift. You start to notice that language isn't built only from words. It's built from feeling. When you feel the mood of a sentence, when you catch the joke or sense the sadness, without needing to translate it, that's real fluency. That's when you know you've stepped into the world of English and made yourself at home. That moment gave me so much peace. I realized I didn't need to chase perfection anymore. I didn't need to understand every word on the page. As long as I could feel the meaning, truly feel it, I was growing. I was learning in silence, without effort, without pressure. And once you experience that, you'll never forget it. You'll start trusting yourself more. You'll start reading faster, feeling freer, thinking less. That quiet confidence becomes your greatest teacher. So, when you find yourself reading and not knowing every single word, don't stop. Keep going, because maybe, just maybe, that next sentence will be the one that makes you realize you already understand more than you think. And in that moment, you'll smile to yourself, knowing that English has finally become a language of your heart, not just your mind. The more I read in English, the more I realized that every story I finished left a quiet mark on me. It wasn't just about language anymore, it was about growth. Each book seemed to teach me something about life, about people, and about myself. Reading slowly became a mirror that reflected who I was becoming through every new page I turned. Sometimes, I would read a story about love and realize how deeply I cared for people in my own life. Other times, I would read about loss and feel my heart ache for moments I thought I had forgotten. The words written by someone I had never met could stir emotions I didn't even know how to express in my own language. That's the incredible power of stories. They speak to parts of us that we rarely listen to. And reading in English made that experience even more powerful, because every time I understood something new, every time I connected with a sentence or a character, I wasn't just growing as a reader, I was growing as a person. The language gave me new ways to think, new ways to feel, and even new ways to describe my world. English became more than a skill. It became a window. Through it, I saw life with fresh eyes. The stories taught me patience. They taught me empathy. They showed me that people everywhere, no matter what country they come from, share the same dreams, fears, and hopes. I began to notice how reading in English connected me not just to a language, but to the entire world. It made me feel part of something bigger, a shared human story written across borders and cultures. And as I read more, something else began to happen. Quietly, I started to think differently. My thoughts became more flexible, my imagination wider. The English words I once feared now carried ideas, colors, and emotions I couldn't have described before. Reading didn't just improve my English, it expanded who I was. Sometimes, after finishing a book, I would sit in silence, letting the last sentence linger in my mind. It felt like saying goodbye to someone who had just taught me something important. And I realized that reading was never just about stories. It was about transformation. Each page added a new layer to my understanding, shaping me into someone who saw beauty in words, depth in silence, and meaning in every language. That's the reflection I carry with me now. The more I read, the more I learn that English isn't something I study, it's something I live. Every story, every sentence, every quiet moment spent with the book is helping me become a version of myself that's more open, expressive, and free. Something magical happens when you read enough stories in English one day. You realize you've started creating your own. It begins quietly. You finish a story, close the book, and moments later, your mind starts replaying scenes in your own words. You find yourself describing what happened, not exactly as the writer did, but in your own voice. That's the moment every reader becomes a storyteller. I remember the first time this happened to me. I had just finished a short story that deeply moved me, and later that evening, I tried to tell a friend what it was about. I didn't have notes. I didn't plan it, I just spoke from memory. My sentences weren't perfect, but they were mine. The emotions were real, and for the first time, I realized that the English I had absorbed through reading was now flowing back out through my voice. It was like unlocking a door that had always been there, waiting for me to open it. Reading had been my teacher, but now storytelling became my expression. When you tell a story, even a simple one, you connect words and emotions in a way that feels completely natural. You start using phrases you didn't even know you remembered. Your voice becomes confident, your rhythm smoother, your imagination freer. You stop worrying about mistakes because you're too busy expressing something that means something to you. That's the secret joy of reading in English. It doesn't just fill your mind, it fuels your creativity. The more you read, the more you start to think in stories. When you speak, you don't just use words, you paint pictures. You communicate, not to impress, but to connect. That's the point when English stops being a lesson and becomes a part of who you are. Sometimes, after finishing a story, I like to summarize it out loud, not like a test, but like a retelling. I imagine I'm sharing it with a friend, giving life to the characters through my own voice. That small practice transforms the way I think and speak in English. Because when you retell, you're not repeating, you're creating. And that's when you realize something powerful. Every reader holds a storyteller inside them. You don't have to be a writer to tell stories. You just need the courage to use your voice. Each time you do, you're shaping your own English journey, not by memorizing, but by expressing. So, after you finish your next story, don't close the book and move on too quickly. Take a breath. Think about what you felt, and tell it again in your own words, in your own way. That's where the real learning happens. That's where you discover that fluency isn't about perfection, it's about sharing your world through language. Every story has an ending, but the end is never really the end. It's just another beginning. And that's exactly what learning English feels like. It's not a finish line. It's a journey that keeps opening new doors with every book you read, every page you turn, and every word you dare to speak. When I look back at how far I've come, it all started with something small, one simple page. I didn't know much. I didn't understand everything, and I didn't always feel confident, but I kept going. And that's the secret no one tells you. Fluency doesn't come from perfection. It comes from continuity, from showing up every day, even when it feels slow, even when it feels difficult. Reading taught me that. Every page gave me a little more strength, a little more understanding, and more of me. And now, when I read in English, I don't feel like a student anymore. I feel like a traveler, someone walking through endless worlds built by words. Every story I read teaches me something new about life, about people, and about the quiet power of persistence. So here's what I want you to remember: your English journey doesn't need to be fast. It just needs to be yours. Every sentence you read, every story you finish, every new word you understand, they all build something invisible but powerful inside you. You may not notice it today, but one day you'll realize how far you've come, and you'll smile at the memory of that first page that once scared you. Maybe tonight you'll sit down with the story and feel unsure again. Maybe you'll think, this is too much. But trust me, you're closer than you think. You don't need to rush. You just need to keep turning the page. Because behind every story lies a new version of yourself waiting to be discovered, more fluent, more confident, more alive in English than you ever imagined. So tonight, choose one page. one paragraph. Let the words find their way to you. Don't worry about mistakes. Don't stop to translate. Just read, feel, listen. Because each story you read isn't just helping you learn English, it's helping you become the person you've always wanted to be. And when you finish that page, come back here. Share your story. Tell me what you read, what you felt, what line stayed with you. Because this isn't just my journey, it's ours. Together, we're building a community of dreamers, readers, and storytellers who believe that language isn't learned, it's lived. So keep reading, keep imagining, keep believing, because your English story has only just begun.